At 90 years old, Timur had survived almost everything the Siberian forest could throw at a man: hunger, isolation, and temperatures cold enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes, but nothing in his long life had prepared him for the sound that came to his door that night. It was deep winter, the kind where the forest felt dead, buried under snow and silence. The wind completely still, the trees frozen in place, even the familiar creaks of ice and wood gone. When the knock came, soft, slow, deliberate, not once but again, Timur opened his eyes in the darkness, his heart instantly alert, because in a place like this nothing knocked on a door by accident. And whatever stood outside always had a reason. He lay still for a moment, listening, until the knock came again. His joints protested as he sat up and pulled his fur-lined coat around his thin frame. Crossing the cabin carefully, each step measured, fully aware of how fragile his body had become with age. The cabin stood alone deep in the Siberian forest, with no neighbors, no roads, and no help within days of travel. And if something went wrong, it would end here. Timur leaned toward the peephole, and what he saw erased every rule he believed governed the wild. A snow leopard stood on his porch. Not pacing, not stalking, simply standing there. Her belly hung heavy with pregnancy, swollen and low, and one of her hind legs was badly injured. The fur scraped away to reveal raw, inflamed flesh beneath, shifting her weight carefully just to remain upright. This was not just a wild animal. This was a predator built to kill. And Timur knew the stories. One swipe of those claws could open a man from chest to throat. Even wounded, even exhausted, she was still deadly. Every instinct screamed at him to step back, to stay silent, to let nature take its course. But when he looked into her eyes, everything changed. Because there was no rage there, no hunger, no calculation, only fear, raw, undeniable, and human enough to steal his breath. This was not a hunter at his door. This was a mother who had run out of options. Timur stood frozen with his hand on the lock, knowing that at his age there would be no second chances and that if he opened the door he might not survive the night. But the knock did not come again and she simply waited. Finally, he took a slow, shaking breath and turned the key, opening the door only a few inches before stepping back and lowering himself, making his body small, not facing her head on, not challenging her, surrendering control of his own shelter. The leopard watched every movement, muscles tense and ready. Then after a long moment she limped forward, crossed the threshold with painful effort, and the instant she was inside her strength gave out, her massive body collapsing onto the wooden floor with a heavy, final sound. She did not attack. She did not growl. She gave up. The silence inside the cabin thickened as if the forest itself was watching, waiting, while Timur moved slowly and deliberately, sliding a bowl of fresh water across the floor toward her, only for her to ignore it and keep her eyes locked on him in a silent test. He understood, water could wait. The wound could not, so he retrieved his old medical kit and knelt at a safe distance, lifting a clean cloth into her line of sight. Empty hands. No weapon. No threat. Quietly saying he was not there to hurt her. The cabin filled with her scent, snow, pine sap, damp earth, and the sharp metallic edge of pain as Timur waited for the warning growl that never came. Then began to clean the wound carefully, feeling the tension beneath her skin as her body trembled with every touch yet never resisted. Then she lowered her head to the floor and closed her eyes. Not in weakness but in trust. And Timur worked quickly, wrapping the leg in a loose bandage before pulling the thickest blanket from his bed and placing it near the stove, where the leopard dragged herself with a low, exhausted sound and curled around her swollen belly. Timur did not sleep, sitting through the long Siberian night listening to her breathing and watching the slow rise and fall of her sides. No longer just an old man in the forest but a witness. Until the first pale light of morning crept through the frost-covered window and the leopard's body stiffened. A deep, guttural sound filling the cabin as something began. Timur slowly backed away, pressing himself into the far corner of the cabin, lowering his eyes and stilling his body as he understood that this moment no longer belonged to him. The leopard's breathing changed, growing deep and uneven as her body tightened when the first powerful contraction seized her. A low, raw sound escaping her throat and filling the small cabin, echoing against the log walls with a sound older than language, older than fear. Timur stood frozen, afraid that even his breath might disturb what was unfolding. As the contractions came again, stronger this time, her muscles rippling beneath her thick coat while she fought through the pain with pure instinct and focus. No panic in her movements, only determination, as life forced its way into the world. Minutes stretched into something timeless and the cabin seemed to exist outside of hours and seasons, holding nothing but breath, tension, and waiting, until it finally happened and the first cub emerged. Impossibly small, spotted and slick with birth, barely moving against the blanket, so fragile that for a brief, terrifying moment it seemed it might not survive. In that instant, the predator vanished as the snow leopard turned fully toward the cub, her exhaustion forgotten while she pulled it close with careful strength and began to lick it clean, her rough tongue moving with surprising gentleness, tightening Timur's chest as he watched. Having seen animals die in this forest and knowing hunger, cruelty, and cold all too well, yet realizing this fierce tenderness was something else entirely. Another contraction followed, and then a second cub entered the world, and the cabin that had once belonged only to a single old man and his silence now held something alive and new. Tiny movements and soft sounds marking the quiet beginning of a family. As the sky outside brightened, pale morning light filtered through the frost-coated window, revealing a scene Timur would never forget. The snow leopard stretched out on the thick blanket, her two cubs pressed against her belly, nursing softly as her breathing slowed and deepened, the tension finally easing from her body and even the wound on her leg looking calmer than before. Timur sat unmoving in his chair with a cup of tea gone cold in his hands, feeling as though he had been allowed to witness something sacred, something never meant for human eyes, a secret of the forest. By midday, the light shifted and the air inside the cabin changed as the leopard stirred, rising slowly to test her injured leg before standing with a strength that had not been there the night before, lowering her head to gently nudge the cubs toward the door with a message that was unmistakable: it was time to leave. Timur stood and opened the door wide, letting cold Siberian air rush into the cabin carrying the scent of snow, pine, and endless wilderness as the cubs hesitated at the threshold, their small paws slipping awkwardly on the wooden floor while their mother waited patiently, watching them with steady eyes, before turning to look directly at Timur, not with curiosity or a passing glance but with recognition. As a moment of quiet, wordless understanding passed between them, complete and unspoken. Then she stepped into the forest, guiding her cubs after her as their shapes faded quickly into the trees, swallowed by snow and shadow, leaving the cabin silent once more. Weeks passed, and one afternoon Timur was moving carefully along a remote ridge deep in the forest, following paths he had walked for decades, when the ground hidden beneath old snow and thin ice suddenly gave way, the world tilting violently as he fell down a rocky slope and struck the ground hard, pain exploding through his body as his ankle shattered on impact and his radio smashed uselessly against the rocks. Timur lay still, gasping for breath as the cold crept in and the forest stretched endlessly around him with no paths, no voices, and no help, while the sun began to sink and paint the sky deep orange and purple, a heavy truth settling over him that this was how it would end. His vision blurred, his strength faded, and then he saw movement above him as a pale shape stood on the ridge, his heart skipping when he realized it was her, with two larger cubs behind her, strong, alert, and alive. Fear surged as he braced himself for teeth and claws, but she did not descend or growl, instead lifting her head to release a strange, powerful call that echoed through the forest, deep and patterned, unlike any sound Timur had ever heard, calling again and again until hours later voices cut through the cold air as hunters, drawn by sounds they could not explain, found Timur lying among the rocks, wrapped him in blankets, and lifted him onto a stretcher. As they carried him away, Timur forced his eyes open one last time and saw the snow leopard still standing high on the ridge. A silent silhouette against the darkening sky. Their eyes meeting in understanding. A life for a life. Before she turned and led her cubs back into the forest, disappearing into shadow and into legend. While Timur survived, carrying a story that would never leave him. Because deep in the Siberian forest, compassion had crossed the boundary between species. And neither would ever forget it.